Us are very familiar faces. Nicole Smith, who is our incredible fearless leader and executive director here at Alive and doing incredible things, not only with Alive, but nationally and globally, and advocating for our volunteers. We're also being joined by Amy Pinger, who if you've attended our Alive Academies previously, is our normal host, but she is our guest of honor today. She is the volunteer manager at Harvesters, and also a board of director here at Alive. So you're in good hands today. So without further ado, I would love to open it up to them. We are recording this session as well, and that session will be available to you on the portal in the next couple of days. Oh, Nicole, you're
There you go. All right, Donna, thank you so much for that for all those great updates and everything. I'm so excited to be here, and we're going to be talking about the thing that we are most passionate about. So we're going to be talking about gaining organizational support from the top down for your strategic volunteer engagement initiatives. I am joined by the amazing Amy Pinger, who is one of our Alive board members. And for this session, we are going to be talking about gaining that buy-in and one of the programs that Alive is so proud of, and it's called Service Enterprise. So this session is really understanding what Service Enterprise is and how to leverage it to gain the buy-in at your organizations. In it, it's going to cover the index of volunteer engagement, the different characteristics that form service enterprise, how to rally your organization behind strategic volunteer engagement, what the return on investment is, and then we'll talk about some questions and inspirations. We do have a QR code on the slide, and it's something that we are going to be referring to and asking about a little bit later in the session, but we wanted to put it up there so that you all could see it now. So if you want to scan it and kind of get your phone ready so that when ready to go, the question is up and ready. So if you want to answer it now too, you can, but we're going to be referring to it a little bit later, but we just wanted to give you the opportunity to get a head start. So we always just like to start with the mission of Alive. And basically, at the end of the day, we are here to make sure that leaders, volunteers have the support that they need and provide a place for them to connect, network, and really be fulfilled and get the support that they need in order to really level up and skill up their professional development. And we're advocating for the volunteer engagement leader, the volunteer engagement professional in the rooms where they cannot get to. We're going there, forging it to really to let the world know and understand the importance of the volunteer manager and how strategically and vitally important they are in order to help get the impact in the communities that we seek. So we are 100% committed to advancing the field. And one of the things that we developed was basically organizational standards. And these standards coincide with the service enterprise characteristics that we're going to be talking about today. But overall, it's talking about understanding organizational readiness and strategy, elevating the profession through professional development and advocacy, effective recruitment and screening practices, comprehensive orientation and training, dedicated supervision and support, ongoing appreciation and acknowledgement, and results-oriented measurement tools. That QR code on the screen, these standards are on our website, and it's a really great way to help guide you through your volunteer engagement processes and be able to have an idea of where you're doing really well, and if there's elements of the program that you need to level up, it helps you to identify where those gaps are so that you have an idea of where you need to where you can improve, but also where you can celebrate. So many people have heard or they have not heard about Service Enterprise. And maybe just even in passing, they're like, Service Enterprise, I've heard about it, but I don't really know what it means. Well, if you are a leader of volunteers, you have more than likely heard of the CVA. Both Amy and I are CVA, so you see those initials behind our names. And basically, what the CVA is to the leaders of volunteers and what the CPA is to accounting professionals is what the Service Enterprise Accreditation is to an organization. When an organization receives the accreditation of being a Service Enterprise designation, it's saying that they have achieved excellence in strategic volunteer engagement. So if you go to any volunteer organization or any organization that works with volunteers and you see this credential on their website, that means that they have put in the time and the work, and strategic volunteer engagement is center to their organization, and they're doing really great things. So you can be very, very comfortable and volunteering there, because you know that you're going to be really that your experience is going to be great, because they have put time into making sure that the program is threaded throughout the entire organization, and that volunteerism is a part of their overall strategy and not just a one-off thing. So Service Enterprise, we collaborate with Points of Light and with the RGK Center of Philanthropy and Community Service, and with some phenomenal training and implementation partners across the country that help bring the program to life. So I'm going to turn it over to Amy, and she's going to talk a little bit about the Index of Volunteer Engagement.
Awesome. Thanks, Nicole. So I'm excited to share about the Index of Volunteer Engagement, and I will share that personally, I took my organization through Service Enterprise over the last few years, and I'll talk a little bit about that process as we go through this. But the first thing we do as Service Enterprise is take organizations through the Index of Volunteer Engagement. This was a tool that has been developed, and it's truly the only research-based tool within the industry of volunteer engagement. And so it is evidence-based, it's research-based, it's an amazing tool that can help you identify areas of growth and areas of celebration. Our partners at the University of Texas at Austin, they are the ones that help facilitate this. And so there is that sort of academia involvement within what we're doing. All right, so the IVE framework, the way this works is that this is step one in your journey with Service Enterprise. You pull together a diagnostic team. This diagnostic team is typically a cross-section of individuals at your organization. And so we're asking for at least one C-suite or executive leader, because that leadership buy-in is key to this process. Now, Nicole and I have presented a lot about Service Enterprise, and one of the things that we've heard before, as well, our C-suite may not be interested right now, or they may not be invested. I will tell you personally, when I started this with our organization, they started because I kept bothering them about it. And they were finally like, let's let her try this. And by the end of it, they were so invested that they're now going out and telling other organizations that they serve with and that they're connected to call me so I can tell them more about it. So I will say, even if you don't have that full buy-in and that full excitement, just keep asking, just keep pushing, and see how incredible this process can be for your organization. We also want to include other folks from across the organization, so board members, staff members that don't necessarily work with volunteers as their full-time position. This really is an organizational assessment. So it should be, how does your organization see volunteer engagement? That outside of the department input is really helpful for identifying some quick wins, which we'll come back to soon. But volunteers as well. So for our organization, when we did this, we had some volunteers that are in some elevated roles, and they're really helpful for our organization. And hearing their feedback, their input on this was really helpful. Next slide. So there are 3 domains for the Index of Volunteer Engagement, and these are the same domains for Service Enterprise that Nicole is going to talk through in just a little bit. With each of these, they fall under those domain categories, so establishing the foundation, volunteer engagement, looking at impacts and outcomes. And what it's going to do is ask questions about each one of these areas. So it's going to ask questions about leadership and involvement, and all of the folks who have agreed to take the diagnostic assessment are going to select how much they agree, disagree. If they don't know, they can choose that as well, so it won't have an impact on those scores. But I really encourage folks to be as honest as possible with this. And so when I had team members that would reach out to me as they were getting ready to take this, and they'd say, Amy, I don't really know if we do this or not. I said, okay, answer that honestly on this assessment. Because the more honest we can answer on this assessment, the more growth we're going to see and more opportunity throughout the process. So once everyone on your team completes the Index of Volunteer Engagement, you will get a report. And so this is actually a report from my organization, so you can see what it looks like. It gives you the category there, and then your total assessment for the category. It's going to tell you what the average rating was. So ours on this leadership involvement was 3.8 with a characteristic score of 71. And so it gives you areas where your organization or those who have participated see your organization as very positive. We're doing this very well. So you can see senior leadership speaks positively and passionately about the role of volunteers. You can also see areas that are maybe raised as caution areas. A lot of times these tend to be some of those quick wins where maybe we are doing this work, but people across the organization don't know that we're doing this work. And so you can see for us there, board members understanding their roles as volunteers. That was one of our quickest wins because it was one of those things that they did. We just didn't, as staff, maybe know that as well as we should. And then you'll get warnings. So you'll get the red ones where people either don't think you're doing it at all, or maybe you're not doing it at all. And so it can be areas to not a fail. This is not a pass fail, right? But just areas to pay attention to and keep in mind as we go throughout this process. So I think that the more honest we can be on this, the more honest data we're going to get back. And that gives us a great trajectory to work from. So after we do this assessment, and everybody does this assessment as individuals, we come back together with our coach and do what's called a debrief. And so the coaches are an instrumental partner to this. We have a number of training and implementation partners across the country, and we've got information about that on our website. But what they do is they sit down with the team who took the assessment and they talk about the assessment and the results. This is what we saw here. Does that sound like what you wrote in here? And how do you see that show up? So it's a great opportunity to have a facilitated conversation about strengths and opportunity areas. It's also a conversation where you're going to find those quick wins where folks have said, I don't know that we do this. And somebody within the team goes, oh, we absolutely do that. Let me share more information. For us, that was our chief resource officer who said, oh yeah, we have a full board orientation and here's all the things that they do. And that just wasn't widely shared. And so people didn't know that we did those types of things. You'll also start to talk about the Service Enterprise Action Plan. And this is going to be really important because this is going to help break down those next steps, where we're going, how we're going to make change. What does that timeline look like? All right, so now I'm going to pass it back over to Nicole to walk us through the individual characteristics.
Thank you, Amy. So as we were talking about, this is understanding and looking at your program in a very well-rounded way and understanding all the aspects of the program that can really help to round out the program and make sure that volunteer engagement is being thread through the entire what's the word I would say, the fabric of the organization. So it's broken down into the different characteristics. So the first one would be establishing the foundation. So this is where you're creating and sustaining the appropriate groundwork and necessary organizational foundations to ensure a successful engagement of leaders, engagement of volunteers and community resources. So when you're looking at your program and how it's functioning, you are examining leadership involvement. Amy just gave a really, really great example of, are the leaders involved? Because usually when your leaders are involved and when they're bought in, it just makes it things a lot easier organizationally on the whole. Are they aware of what your strategy is? Are they aware of how it's being implemented, or do they have no idea? Do they have no clue? I've been a part of organizations, and you talk to leadership and they have no idea what's happening on the volunteer side of things. And so that's a really key component. So you get to address that, and you get to take a look at it and assess, are your leaders involved? The overall planning of the strategy that you have and how it is being implemented. The funding and resource allocation. What does that look like? Is the program being funded? And if so, how are those resources, not only just money-wise, but even people-wise? How are those resources being allocated? And a huge one is technology. Do you have the technology that can help sustain scalable, impactful growth? Is the technology limiting the efficiencies and the amount of impact or experiences that either your volunteers are having, or those who are interacting with your organization? Is your technology enhancing that or inhibiting it? So the next would be best practices in volunteer engagement, practices that ensure the effective engagement of volunteers and community partners. You take a look at your training. What does that look like? Once the training happens, your onboarding, what does that look like? One of the things that I like to tell people when they're hearing about volunteer engagement for the first time, especially many nonprofit organizations will say volunteers are so important to our organization, and they're pivotal to everything that we do. And one of the things I ask, I'm like, well, as new employees are coming into the organization, do they meet the volunteer manager? And the number of times that people's eyes are like, oh, I'd never thought about that. But that's one of those ways to get that to start to infiltrate from the top down as new people are coming in into the organization, and understanding the value of the volunteers within the organization and what that strategy is and how they are a part of it. And they as an organization, as a community, they have a part in helping to ensure that experience. So looking at all different aspects of onboarding. So not only from just the volunteer engagement side, but even also from the employee side. And then supervision and support. As the volunteer manager, do they have experience in supervision? If they do, how do they get that experience? How do they get that professional development to upskill? And then do they have the support, not only from their supervisors, but also maybe from their colleagues, and also from the volunteers as well? So looking at everything in a 360 lens, and understanding that it is all a part of helping to have a strong program. And then everybody's favorite topic, recruitment and cultivation. what recruitment looks like, what recruitment is, what recruitment isn't, cultivating volunteers and what that looks like. So taking really good look at all of that and assessing to see, again, where you're doing well and where there's room for improvement. And then impact and outcomes. This is for all my numbers people in the room. Numbers people, raise their hand. I'm not one of them, so I'm not really raising my hand. But it's so important. We hear often about the quantitative and qualitative data that you have. The qualitative, for me, that's the easier part because I love to tell the stories and understand the impact. But also one of the things we had just talked about before was like your leadership involvement or leadership buy-in and understanding those things. A lot of your leaders in leadership positions are acting off of data. So are we providing data-driven results for them or data-driven strategies for them to help them understand how what we're doing is working throughout is affecting the entire organization. So talking about, you might have all the numbers, but what do those numbers mean, right? So having the numbers that's only half of it. So communicating that out. How are you communicating that? Is it through stories? Is it through raw data? Tracking? What are you tracking? Everybody always knows, oh, we're tracking numbers, but there's all sorts of like volunteer hours, but there's all kinds of things that you can be tracking. And then how are you evaluating based upon that tracking? What are those numbers? What is that data telling you? And how is it helping you make informed decisions to move forward? Looking at growth and change and what that means for the organization based upon the data that you are collecting, and collaboration, how these things can help you collaborate not only interdepartmentally, but even with perhaps funders, other people, supporters of the organization, but looking at different ways that these all can tie together and work for the success of the program. And now I'm going to turn it back over to Amy.
Awesome. Thanks, Nicole. So this is where we get into some of the how do we make this happen, right? So we just talked about the process of doing this assessment, and then we talked about some of the characteristics in a very quick way. What this training looks like is really diving in deep into each and every single one of those characteristics that Nicole just kind of highlighted for us with a coach who does this with multiple organizations from across the country. We have a foundation for service enterprise within Kotter's Accelerating Change model. If you are not familiar with this, I highly encourage you to go to the website. You can just put it in the Google and look for Kotter's Accelerating Change model, and they have free resources online that are available. So you can actually download their changes book, which is an ebook. So great resources for you there. But what Service Enterprise really does is looks at the 4 change principles along with looking at the model as a whole. So thinking about leadership and management. Are we able to capitalize on windows of opportunity? Leadership is so important, and being able to see the opportunity and then take action to capitalize on that. It's about having a vision, having action, having innovation and celebration, because too often in this work, we're just kind of moving from one thing to another. And so being more intentional to slow down and really focus on how we're doing this work is important. The select few plus the diverse many. And so this is about, if we're creating change within an organization, we need to bring people in. We need to bring people to the table. Leadership is an activity. It's not a position. It is something that can help you uncover leaders at all levels of the organization. And so when we're thinking about who to bring in, it really should be people who are not necessarily 100% volunteer engagement focused. Those folks are absolutely critical, but we also need people across the organization to come together. There's a big focus on using both our head and our heart as well, because people are not inspired by logic alone. we have to create that sort of fundamental human desire to contribute to a larger cause and activate that piece as well. Giving that change purpose and meaning and helping people understand where this is coming from, because folks typically don't like change. There's a few of us that like change, but most folks don't like change too much. It also makes it change from have to want to. And so not only do we have to do this, but we also really want to do this. And so feeling included in the process from multiple people across the organization gets that early buy-in. Next slide. So when we're thinking about this model, we're looking at service enterprise as the big opportunity. So going through service enterprise as an organization is investment of time, it's an investment of resources, and then energy to do the work. And so using that as sort of the call to action, the rallying point where we're all going to get around. The guiding coalition is typically those who are closest to the work. So for example, in my organization, it was myself and my direct supervisor who were part of that, and then a couple of people from our team who attended all these trainings and then collaborated to look at standards with our coach. We also want to look at forming a strategic vision for volunteer engagement. Ideally, this aligns beautifully with our strategic organizational plan and our organizational vision. This is the time where we really start to look at our volunteer engagement metrics being reported to the board. Does the strategic plan mention volunteer engagement and the way it moves the organization forward? We're also going to enlist that army of champions. So the folks from across the organization that are respected as leaders within their own position, that are fully bought into this process. So those are the ones that are going to be at the meetings that you're not at, that are continuing to champion the role of volunteers within the organization, that are going to continue to say, oh, this is a cool idea. Maybe we could bring volunteers in to help make it possible and make it work. And so those champions are incredibly important. Some of those can start with you during the initial IVE assessment, giving their feedback and really will help to move the work forward. So as we move forward, we're going to look at the barriers. Right? Barriers are very real, very valid, especially, when we're thinking about risk management and things like that. So for me, I think it's all about identifying what those are, engaging with them in order to remove those barriers. So being curious is critical to this process, asking questions. One of my absolute favorite things to do when I am creating change at my organization is to find the person who will tell me no, and then have a conversation with me about why this thing I want to change will not work. Because it helps inform me. It helps me to understand better what the barriers are, because within my role, I can't see every single barrier. It's impossible. And so if folks who are closer to that barrier can engage in this process, tell me about the barrier, it'll help me to co-create this environment where we are attacking this barrier together. So instead of this being an obstacle between two people trying to create change, or two departments trying to create change, it's two departments coming together to look at the obstacle. How can we work around it? How can we adjust our tactics? How can we maybe just identify that it's more of a personal barrier than an actual barrier, and how might we approach the situation differently? So working with those barriers, staying curious, asking questions is a huge piece of making this change happen and making the change stick. Generating short-term wins are so incredibly important. They are the fuel that starts moving these things forward. And many of them come out of the diagnostic. As I had shared earlier, when we went through the Index of Volunteer Engagement and we had our time to come together, folks didn't realize how we were bringing on our board members at our organization. And so one of the first things that we did, which was a huge win, was that our former chief resource officer had a session for all staff. And so all staff got to learn about the process of bringing on new board members. What does their training look like? How do I identify them? How long are their terms? It was incredible. And it was a huge first win for us that really started this momentum. And we celebrated it in a huge way because it was such a win. Sustaining that acceleration is where those coaches come in, because in this field, we are so stretched thin. We're wearing multiple hats. I don't know a volunteer engagement manager that sits at their desk with their feet up all day. And if that's you, tell me your secret. But most of us are stretched so incredibly thin that, you know, sometimes big things like this can feel like, oh, that's just one more thing I have to do while all of these things are happening. And so those coaches are great because they are your accountability partners. I just met with my coach earlier in the week and I said, here's the things we're doing really well. Here's the things that aren't moving at all, because things happen. This process doesn't happen overnight. So you go through the training over a course of several months, and then you meet with your coach one-on-one for, depends on how long, how much change, how much organizational hurdles get in the way between there. That's decided between the organization and their coach, and they figure out what that timeline is that works best for them. But that coach will continue to motivate, inspire, hold them accountable as they're walking through this process. You know, sometimes within organizations, my voice may not be as loud as the coach's voice, right? So having somebody from the outside saying, yes, these are absolutely things that we have to do as an organization can be a huge benefit to help move things forward. So I encourage, if you do go through this process, to be really open, really honest. The coaches, the T&I partners that we work with, they are incredible. They work with organizations across the country, some of them, and have so many reports and resources, and they provide incredible support for the organizations going through it. They're also the cheerleaders, because again, we're so busy all the time and so stretched thin that we don't often in this field stop to celebrate. And so having somebody that's going to say, whoa, that was huge, can we take a moment to celebrate it, is really important. And then instituting that change. So this is where that speaking to people's head and hearts comes to play. And I actually have a great example that we dealt with as part of our service enterprise process that I'm going to share. And I'm going to say that speaking to the head and hearts is not just about speaking to the staff head and hearts, but also speaking to our volunteers head and hearts throughout this process, because you know, staff are going to feel the changes that we're making very acutely, but our volunteers are also not as closely connected to it. And so they may be not understanding. So one of the things that is in service enterprise as a characteristic is technology use. Our organization engages volunteers. They come in, they put food together in our warehouse. We have big shifts. We have 100 volunteers for some shifts walking in at the same time. For so long, we've been paper and pen checking them in, right? But our system has the capability to have volunteers sign in electronically. And so we knew that this paper and pen method was not working. We knew that it was cumbersome. We knew that it was creating more work for the staff. And so we started to implement the volunteer sign-in electronically process. We had a huge pushback from our volunteers who are there all the time. Our tried and true, we call them the regular volunteers, although nothing about them is regular. They're just so consistent. And their fear, I use that word very intentionally, was that someone on the team was going to lose their job. That's why they thought this change was happening. That is absolutely not why this change was happening. And so by taking that time to sort of step back and speak to the head and hearts and say, no one is losing their job. Van is absolutely not going anywhere, but Van is trying to do this and this and this and this. And by having volunteers sign in, it helps us keep better records. and allows her to have more time talking with our volunteers as they're coming in. It allows her to spend more of her time doing the things that really bring her joy, and that help her feel connected to the work rather than just somebody pushing papers. And as soon as we did that, it changed everything. The volunteers were now, oh my gosh, yes, absolutely. If it's going to help her, we definitely are bought into this. We definitely want to do it. And so it created a huge change within the organization just by making sure we were being more intentional about talking to our volunteers about the change, and trying to, as much as we can, anticipate what those questions might be in advance. It also was huge for our staff. So talking to our staff about, absolutely, we know that this is going to be hard to implement and it's probably going to be messy, but we're going to keep working on it together, and your input and your feedback is so incredibly important to this process. When people feel like they understand why something is happening, when they feel like their voice has been elevated and brought to the table, when they feel like they're informing change, not just reacting to change, it really helps to move things forward into a way that will sustain itself long term. Okay, so here is where that Menti code comes in. So we have, Nicole's dropped the Menti link into the chat. What we are looking for, because this is all about transforming our volunteer engagement, taking new behaviors, bringing them in, working with the head and the heart, and to change. And so we want to hear from you how, where do you see your organization now? And what would you like to see in the future? So if you will get in that Menti code and submit.
Donna, I'm going to share my screen so that everybody can see what's going in just a second. But if people can either click or use the QR code. For some people, the QR code isn't working. For some people, it is. So if you're not sure, the link is in the chat. I only have one answer so far, so I want to just make sure that it is working. And that one was to be a part of high-level decisions, reaching out, reaching their potential for creating meaningful steward opportunities. Okay, they're starting to come in. Okay, I'm going to share my screen really quick.
I'm always excited to see what comes up on these.
Okay, can you see it?
Awesome, I can see it, yes.
Great.
To be part of those high-level decisions, reaching our potential for creating meaningful stewardship opportunities. One of the things in the service enterprise characteristics is talking about a volunteer to donor pipeline. So how are we providing volunteers with opportunities to give back financially, but not making that feel forced or pushed? One of the things that we use with our organization is, every dollar that we get helps us provide 2 meals. And when you say that to volunteers, they're like, oh, I could give more than $1. But it also doesn't create that pressure, right? Like it doesn't create a pressure that I'm asking you for millions of dollars, right? It's an easy way to take that next step. So I love that.
I like the one where it says now, reactive, future, proactive. 4 small words, but huge message. I feel every aspect of that, and it covers so much. I really like that. I really like that. Another one, transforming future, adjust to current needs as they arise. And the last one that popped up, we are in volunteer silos. So our volunteers hear from different parts of our organization if they serve in more than one role. Getting to one communication system would be a game changer. Oh yeah, that's a really, really, really good one. That is a really, really good one.
I would say that would be a game changer for your staff too. Having the opportunity to really share what they do with the volunteers and having more of them hear about that work is incredible. So I like to think about this too as, you know, we're thinking about it as staff members and as our volunteers and how these are wins for everybody, right? Because if it's an organizational piece, it's not just the volunteers, it's the staff and how we're moving things forward together.
Okay, Donna, I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing. And if you can bring the presentation back up, that would be great. And while I do that, I'll read off one more that came in. Current, getting by okay with recruitment and recognition. Future, be strategic in planning and interacting with volunteers to make their experience more vibrant. And that is literally all of the things that you all talked about and put here is literally why Service Enterprise was created and curated to help address each one of those things. Because every organization is going to have a different strength and a different area of improvement. And it's designed to be that 365 viewpoint to help identify and bring the level up, right? So that at the very least, even if not every aspect of the program is operating here, at least you're not operating here and here, because your here could be pulling this down. But at least if this is up a little bit, that higher, it's that whole, you know, shoot for the moon. And even if you don't make it, you'll still land in the stars type of situation. So just going through and hearing what you've heard so far, you know, are there any questions? And even just as importantly, was there anything in there that you were inspired by that got you to think a little bit differently? Or maybe you identified this is an area where we might need help and this is, you know, maybe Service Enterprise is the way we should go. Marianne, do you see any questions in the chat?
No, nothing yet.
Okay. Let me see. Any inspirations? Yes, any aha moments, anything that made you think, or even an aspect that we talked about that you're like, oh, I never thought about that before. I thought I know about this and this and this and this. I know everybody knows about recruitment. Everybody's thought about recruitment because we're always thinking about it. But are there any aspects of the other characteristics that you're like, huh, I'd never even considered that or thought about that?
Oh, we got some great questions coming in. Is all the info about Service Enterprise on the Alive website?
It sure is. I will drop the link. I will find it and drop the link right now.
Yes, absolutely. And we do have a number of training and implementation partners that are across the country that do these work just a little bit different at each one, but a lot of those are either connected to a state, and so it's, you know, maybe a state service commission or someone like that that's leading these in your area. So we're happy to connect you as well. Would you be able to supply testimonials in order to convince leadership to do this? Absolutely, Kathy. One of the things that as part of submitting for accreditation is organizations actually write out their comments about what this did for our organization, how this change happened. And with that, we're getting one from that executive level as well as other individuals within the organization. And so those can be really, really powerful in inspiring others. Let's see, now they're going a little fast for me, so I will catch up. Related to Amy's comment about folks not knowing items her team was working on, absolutely. It's really interesting how, sometimes we're working in a silo that we don't realize we're in, right? And so we don't realize what people don't know. And so finding ways to, strategically bring other voices in, and getting those questions in is really important.
And the
Yes.
last one that it said it was like a really great general, it was general, but a great reminder that this work takes effort, but in the end worth it. Yes. And so we kind of designed this in such a way that it was just like a high level reminder, a high level, almost cheering you on type thing. Most of you all probably know about 90% of it. Maybe there was one aspect of it that you hadn't thought about in a while, or you just needed that reminder. The overall, because I know a lot of the presentations that we do, we really like to make sure that people have like tangible things that they can go back and take and write and have that. But for this was just more of a general overall understanding of what Service Enterprise is, a reminder of the overall standards, where you can go and get them, and when you're ready, where you can access them to share with leadership, or even to do that. Maybe it's like you use the standards to do your annual assessment of your volunteer program. This is where we were last year. How are we doing now? One of my favorite parts about the Service Enterprise program is that diagnostic. And because like Amy said, people are taking that, and because it's a self-diagnostic, there's things that you might think you're doing great. And then like so for the question of like, do you know about your volunteer program is doing this? And maybe you and the colleagues that you work with closely know, but then leadership says, oh, we had no idea. And that's eye-opening, because we're always like, we're in our bubble and we forget, and we think that everybody knows what we're doing, but maybe they weren't included on the newsletter list that went out to everybody. So we're thinking that they're getting the information, but they're not. So it's a really great way to get a temperature of not really exactly what's happening, but the perception of what is happening. Because unfortunately, perception is reality. Reality always isn't reality. It's the understanding of what people think or is really happening. And that's why this program is so great, to help identify what that perception is and get perception and reality on the same wavelength. Donna, can you go to the next slide? We just want to share where all those T&I partners are. But Amy, did you want to say anything really quick? Okay. So Amy mentioned it a couple of times, but we have 20 training and implementation partners nationwide. So we have people all over the US who are helping with the implementation of the program, or who are able to take you through that program. Again, we dropped the link into the chat. You can find out more. There is a QR code that if you want more information, you can fill that out and we can get you connected to a training partner in your area. One of the biggest things that I love about Alive is just that reminding everybody that you are not alone. You don't have to go through this journey on your own. If you're not sure, and if you're like, hey, maybe these are the places, that's why we ask, where would you like to see your organization? Part of that, number one, is yes, this is where we want to go. But sometimes what we need the help is, well, we know where we want to go, but how do we get there? That's what the GPS is for, right? You put in the direction, you put in the end goal, and then you hit start, and it tells you and guides you on how to get there. So consider the training and implementation partners your personal GPS for organizational success and fulfilling the vision of where you want to be. So I think that's about it. If there's aren't any other questions, let me see. I think something came in. I've heard of Service Enterprise before, but had not taken the time to delve into it. I love the assessment tool, and it could be a great process for our organization. Yes, and that is what we were finding a lot of. So that's why we thought it was really important to have this conversation, because it was really, oh, Service Enterprise, okay, I think I know what it is, but the name alone doesn't really tell you the value and how fabulous of a program it is. So we really wanted to dive into it so that people really understand what that is. And especially now when you see that that credential and you hear and you're following our socials and you hear that organizations have received the Service Enterprise designation, that it is a huge deal. It is a huge deal. The assessment tool, if you're talking about the diagnostic assessment tool, that tool is not on the website. You have to fill out information and we get you connected. But for the Alive standards, where that is the assessment, like that's if you want to do the program assessment there, that is on the website. And if you go onto the website, let me see, I think I can find that for you. It is under resources and Alive professional standards. And if you click on that, it can help you, the standards that we talked about at the beginning will be there and you can do a general assessment for that. So I just dropped that in there. Okay, so we're almost at time. So I want to thank you all so much for attending. And I think Donna, our host, has one last thing to wrap up with. Yes, Allie, it is something that can be done virtually. I'm sorry, Donna, it can be done virtually, and we have trainers national all over. So if they're not next to you, we have national trainers that can help virtually. And now I'm done. Sorry, Donna.
No worries. Well, wow, that was fantastic. Thank you so much, Nicole and Amy. I love learning from the two of you. You're both so knowledgeable on this and so passionate about this. And it's an amazing program. So we really encourage you to get involved. So if you are here and not a member, we would love for you to be a member here at Alive. Strongly encourage you to do that. So here on the slide, you can see we do have different levels of membership. We've got our individual one, the annual fee of $75 per person. And I promise you that is a bargain for everything that you can get as being part of a member of Alive. We also do have agency or local association membership at $125. And then we also have a model of pay what you can. All this information is on our website. I think that's it. It sure is. Thank you again so much, everybody, for joining us. Thank you again, Nicole and Amy, for lending your expertise to us on this afternoon. I hope everybody enjoys the rest of their day and the rest of their weekend. And our motto here at New York Roadrunners is see a volunteer, thank a volunteer. So you see a volunteer today, make sure you say thank you. But again, join me in thanking Nicole and Amy for their time today. Bye, everybody. Good night. Bye.